Welcome back, founders, for part 2 of understanding our plan, strategy, and execution piece of our marketing. And all for the purpose of making sure we end up with a bottom line profit. We are joined back in the lab by Jill Sauter. Hello, welcome back, Jill. Great to have you here. So part 2. We wanted to talk all about, now we've nailed down our audience. We understand what the pain point is. We understand what problem we're actually solving. Now we get to the fun stuff. This is the stuff everybody wanted to jump right into. This is all about now, how do we communicate that message, right? How do we communicate that message with hopefully bottom line results at the end of it? So to start this, I'm curious to know your perspective on we hear a lot in the sales world about a pipeline and kind of the stages of engagement that we go through and how each stage is supposed to have a different markets or a message. So tell the audience a little bit about your philosophy or your stand on pipelines.
Well, I understand the pipeline. What I like to do is I find that very company focused. It's not customer focused. What I like to do is flip it a little bit and look at how customers move from having no idea what your product or service is to actually buying. And there's for some products and services, especially new innovative products, there's an education portion there where people may not know that they have a problem and they need information. They need ideas. They need to understand what problem they have and what the impacts are on their business or on their lives if they're consumers. And I like to look at it more about how we get people from, I don't know who you are or what you have to sell or why I would even talk to you, to here's some money, let's do some business here. Because I think that focusing on how many likes we get and how many people open the email, that's very focused on the tactics and the business. And those are great measurables, don't get me wrong. I still appreciate those. But I think that when we're looking at how we send out a message, that has to be different depending on where the customer's at. I always tell clients that you can't ask people to marry you on the first date. And you can, I guess, but the results may not be what you want. But I think that that's an important, it's a meaningful analogy because lots of people want to, especially with small businesses, small budgets, we want to put out an ad on Facebook and get those leads coming in. And that can work for some products and services, but not most. It's very rare that somebody will see an ad and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that I had that problem. And now I totally understand it. And I can understand how much it will cost me and what the benefit will be to me and how I'll consult all the people that I need to make this decision. And so I've seen your ad and 3 seconds later, I'm buying what you have to sell. That's very, very rare. And it's a mistake that especially small businesses make because they don't have a big budget. We've heard that when you use Facebook or Google or something like that, we'll just put an ad in there. And another business we know, they're getting lots of response to those ads. But maybe the product isn't a high risk. Maybe something like choosing a lawyer to write your will, or choosing a daycare for your kids, or buying a big ticket item like a piece of farm equipment. Those are big purchases, and they require time and they require investment to do some research on them. Those are not the products or services that you can sell with a Facebook ad. And I shouldn't single out Facebook, but a social media ad.
Right.
A post is not, or an AdWords campaign is not going to be the ticket for a lot of businesses until you understand what's the process that people have to go through. And like I said earlier, businesses that are bringing something innovative or new to market, that's something that we may not even know how it fits into our lives. as a business, I may not know that I have a problem because the people that work with me are managing around that problem and it hasn't hit the bottom line yet. And as a business manager, I don't know that I have an issue. So in that case, we have to start developing knowledge with our customers. We have to tell them, what's the risk of the status quo? If you don't do anything about this issue, what's going to be the problem down the road? Or with a consumer, if you don't look at how you solve this problem, here's what the implications can be for you in a few years. But sometimes you need to start that education and help people really understand what the problem is and what impact it will have on their lives or their businesses before you can move on to say, hey, we have a solution. Here's what it is. Here's how much it costs. And here's why it would benefit you to purchase.
So to go back, just to clarify, so I'm a small business owner. I have a product or service. What questions am I asking myself to define whether or not social media is the right first touch point? You talked about time frame, you talked about expense. Are there a couple of key questions that business owners can kind of just check in with to go, okay, I can start creating awareness, or no, I have more work to do before I...
Well, you mentioned a good word, awareness.
Okay.
I think awareness of the problem is a big one. Do people know that they have a problem? Okay. And if you're in the restaurant business, yes, everybody's hungry, right? So that's an easy one. But are they hungry for what you have? Do you know that people want vegan food? Do you know that they want fast food? Do you know that they're on a job site and they're wanting to eat between 9 and 5? There's a lot of different issues around just the food. The food is the feature. We talked about features in the last segment. What is it about your food that they want? Are they aware that they have a problem, that they can't get nut-free food, or they need food for a fast lunch? They don't want to eat inside because of COVID. They have, personal choices that they've made that they don't want to eat inside. So what does that mean for me in 40 below? I can't sit outside on your picnic table.
Right.
Or I need it delivered to me. Like, what are the problems that people have? And especially if you've got something that's new and innovative, do they know they have a problem? Do they know what your product or service will add to their life if it's a luxury good? So understanding, are they aware of this gap in their lifestyle or their business? So that awareness is important. And then the understanding of how that translates into impact on their life, that's important as well. And if you don't have those two things, then some of these instantaneous requests for a purchase, whether that's a Facebook ad that leads to a lead form generation on your generation form on your website, maybe people aren't ready to do that yet. And then the question is, what information will get them to be comfortable moving to the next step? Back to that dating analogy, what's the information that people need to be able to move to the next step? And that's different for every product or service. So it's hard to say exactly what those questions are, and especially when we're dealing with products versus services.
Right.
But I think two big questions are, do they know the risk of the status quo? And is there any urgency for them to change? If they know what the risk is, and if they know that there's some urgency around this problem that they have, then their willingness to buy is a lot greater than if they know they have lots of time.
Okay.
And there's not much risk.
What I'm hearing then is, so as the business owner, it is my job now. I understand my audience. Now I have to determine, and I understand their pain point. Now I have to determine, are they aware that they even have a pain point? Are they aware of it, or are they numb to it? B, then what is the cost or consequence of them just staying in that space and not doing anything, right? And what was the third piece? Sorry, that I liken to status quo.
What's the urgency?
What's the urgency?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there something, a deadline coming up? Like kids need new shoes
Right.
after summer so that they can go into the classroom with their non-marking soles. So that's when we sell lots of shoes with non-marking soles, is in August and September.
I get the garage door, right? Minus 65 is coming. Will it go up and down in minus 65, or are you exposing your whole basement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the, like a question, lots of people talk about messaging in questions. And one that I always relate to is your faucet leaking? And if the answer is yes, then there's urgency there, and there's a risk of the status quo, right? So yes, that's the kind of message that you can put on something that asks people to act really quickly. But if it's a high priced item, if it's a big purchase that means a lot to their lives, those are things that people tend not to jump on really quickly. They need more information, and being able to help a potential customer get that information is really what the marketing should be about in the early stages.
Beautiful. So those are early stages. So again, what I'm taking here, understand the problem that you're solving, make sure that the customer is aware that they have a problem, knowledge or education. Don't move right into selling the product, knowledge or education on the product, getting the customer to understand what happens if you don't change, getting the customer to understand the sense of urgency. What I love about what you've said here now too, is that you ask them to go somewhere, right? You don't throw all that information and say, okay, take that and swallow it. You here, take that, swallow it, and now do this. Here's your glass of water to swallow it down with, right? So you lead them somewhere. So all of that you said is kind of the early stages of marketing. You're creating lots of awareness. At what point do you suggest that we actually start to introduce the product or the service?
Well, you can do that right away. I think that there's for most businesses, there's some, you're always getting connections with new customers. And that's back to that lead funnel that lots of people talk about. You're always going to have those new customers coming in. You're always going to have people that you're getting to know, or they're getting to know you. We're talking about your problem, and then maybe they purchase. And this can happen whether you're selling to consumers or to businesses. So this is a process that happens on a continual basis. So you almost have to do two different kinds of marketing, or like different types of marketing at the same time. But the challenge I find for small businesses, they want to jump right to, I'm sending out an email, and there'll be a link to get people to put their name into my website to get more information. And then that's when I give them the pitch. That can happen. It's not happening all the time. And the money that you spend, the ultimate goal is to make a sale, right? And back to your cash flow. It's usually about cash flow. My cash flow's down. I need sales right away. The problem is that when you go to those quick fixes, like the social ad that gives you a lead that will somehow generate a sale, nobody ever talks about the rest of that part.
Right.
After what happens after you get the lead. But I think that the jumping to that part, businesses do that a lot. They put an ad in that special magazine, or they do social media or Google ads, and those can work sometimes, but the payback on those has a longer cycle. But people are looking for that instant cash injection. And that's what I see happen, is people invest in those, and then they say, well, it's not working. I'm not making those sales. So then let's invest in the next shiny thing brought to me by somebody who's going to, bring me lots of cash flow. And unfortunately, that's not how it works. You have to do this nurturing along the way, and you have to bring people with you, from helping them be aware of their problem to getting them comfortable with you and your solution to actually buying. And there's no way to skip those steps. And so unfortunately, when people are in that cash crunch, the lifeline is, well, if we do this tactic, it will bring you lots of sales. And unfortunately, that doesn't often happen, and it causes people to invest in things that aren't really strategic for their long term. And
Right.
so being mindful of the fact that there's no silver bullet to go from creating this ad or doing this tactic, going to this trade show, there's no silver bullet that leads from that tactic to a sale. There's lots of steps in between. And if we invest in those things with the knowledge that there has to be some other work done to get to that sale, it can be a great investment. But if we're looking for that silver bullet, it's not going to, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. And
I think that's huge. I think that, for business owners, again, because we like the shiny things and the sparkly things, and we're always just go, and the visionaries, and, we're always 10 steps ahead of ourselves, really, quite honestly. I think that's what happens in the marketing strategy. So I think that is such an important point for founders to hear through this. There is no silver bullet. You have to pace yourself. You have to, to your point, it's all these small steps. It's like taking the customer through that entire experience, holding their hand through that entire experience, starting off in the beginning, just explaining the pain point and knowledge, to your point. So such important information in this. It feels like this part has really been about the message, and what I've heard is just really articulate small pieces along the way. We finally then get to the ask, which is where, we oftentimes will talk about price. I do see, I'm just going to throw this in here. I see a lot of business owners, I'm not going to stereotype with genders, but that oftentimes we're afraid to then ask for the ask. We for those that actually walk the customer through that whole experience, and then we get to, they're on the fence and they have their wallet out, and then we don't ask. We're like, okay, well, right. And so making sure that we take them to the finish line, we cross them over, we get our touchdown dance. And then
it's funny, I see that a lot with people who make a product, and they're the visionary. They identify the problem. They see that their potential customers are having issues with this, or they're wasting money, or it's a big time saver. They come up with this product, and then they just shove it out into the marketplace, like people would shove a kid onto a stage during a talent show. Yeah, you just shove that thing out there, and lots of people just expect people, like a potential customer, to look at it and have this light bulb come on over their head saying, this is amazing. This is exactly what I was dreaming of. And I knew that there was something out there. I was just waiting for it to get here. And that doesn't happen. You have to bring people along and help them know that this thing that you created has it has implications for your life or your business. And this is how it works, and this is what it does, and this is how it impacts your profitability as a business or your life as a consumer.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially if it's something that you've worked with for a long time, whether it's an app or an invention or something like that. If you worked with it for a long time, the impact that this can have, but you have to bring people along and help them understand what that's doing. And just shoving it out there and saying, here's your problem solver, it doesn't work that way, and it's unfortunate. But yeah, that's where, like you said, that's where people who aren't experienced in marketing can falter, because they are not asking for that sale, but they also haven't brought people along with them in that journey.
Yeah. And I think too, the fear of rejection, right? So when they don't get that customer or prospect saying, oh, this is the best thing ever, they tend to run away from it, right? Instead of leaning into the no and asking, okay, well, why not? I'm just curious, I want to learn from this, right? Why isn't it working? It's human nature, I think, that the whole, being accepted by people, that's one of our greatest needs, right? Is acceptance. But
I think if you look at that, here's an example. A client of mine did an email campaign, and there was a couple of people sent back an email saying, I'm not interested in this right now. We do things this way. to me, that like he sent that to me and I thought, oh, that's awesome. They've offered you a gift. They've offered you an insight into why they might not want your product or service. And maybe you'll never convince that person that they need your product or service, but maybe you can craft a message around what that person said that can help the next person who might think that. So in this instance, they said, we don't do it that way, we do it this way. So then the next email that you send out to that specific group of customers, if you're thinking about doing it this way, we might suggest doing it our way, because all of these wonderful things will happen for you if you try a new approach. And that won't appeal to everybody, but at least all the people who were saying, yeah, we used to do it that old way too, and there's a better way. Awesome, let's try that. And so when you get that rejection, like you said, to me, it's just an insight into the thought process of that customer. And then it, like, to me, those are always gold, because
Yes.
you can pull that out and say, okay, well, some of my potential customers are thinking this way, and I wanted them to think this way. That's great. You've just been able to read someone's mind.
Beautiful. I think that's so powerful. I think that is the, if you can get into their mind and be able to articulate what they're thinking without them even asking, that brings you that much closer, right?
Yeah.
To the sale. All right, Jill, that was brilliant. Thank you. And I believe here, one of the tools that you're offering everybody listening is the campaign evaluation worksheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And tips to go along with that. So before you tune in to part 3, make sure that you download that worksheet. Thank you, Jill, for offering that up. And then I'll just warn everybody for part 3, this isn't the sexy part again. This is all about measurement. But if we don't measure, we're not going to get the results. So thank you, Jill. You've just really reminded me and everybody watching, there is no silver bullet. And the only way to get to the end faster is really to start measuring and understanding what is working, what isn't working, and getting on to the modification sooner rather than later, but knowing what to modify. So that's what we're talking about in part 3. So as unsexy as it might sound, you need to come back for that. Otherwise, all of this is for naught. All right, we'll see you back here for part 3. Go grab a coffee. We'll see you in a bit. Bye.